What is up, everyone? This is the Twice Over Film Club, and I'm your host, Faraz. Today, we're going to be discussing Thomas Vinterberg's The Hunt from 2012 in detail. This episode does have spoilers. Hopefully, you've listened to our preview episode so you know what the nature of the conversation will be, which, fair warning, can be disturbing. Make sure you're following us at the Twice Over on all the socials. That's where we update while we're watching and keep you up to date on our new episodes. You can also reach out to us there if you have any comments or movie suggestions. Also, if you're interested in being a guest on the podcast, hit us up and let us know. All right, it was myself with Fahad and Yusuf, so let's get to it.
Let's talk about it.
All right, so something Yusuf said about the subject matter of the film, right? It can be problematic for some viewers, but now that we're in our spoiler section of our discussion, we learn about the innocence of the main character pretty early on. So is it still problematic to watch the movie for some viewers? Do you think that would still be an issue, Yusuf, or no?
That's a good point. I think probably 20 minutes into the film, you're over the most uncomfortable part, and it turns out it wasn't that uncomfortable in itself, right? Because there isn't anything graphic. In fact, there was no sexual abuse that occurred as far as we are aware. So like that should alleviate some of that. I think the subject matter itself still remains a little bit uncomfortable.
Sure.
And I will tell you why. I think it would be worth it to kind of just go through a quick plot summary here before we do that. So this movie just focuses on Lucas, who's played by Mads Mikkelsen. He's a man in a small Danish town trying to get his life together. He's recently divorced, barely sees his son. He has lost his proper teaching job, and he's working at like a school nursery basically for young children.
Or something.
Yeah, preschool. They kept saying kindergarten in the subtitles, and I was like, that's not kindergarten. But Lucas is beloved by the townspeople and the kids. Really part of the community. He's starting to get his life together. His son's going to move in with him. He's seeing a woman. A girl at the kindergarten named Clara, who is his best friend, Theo's daughter. Clara accuses him of, doing something inappropriate with her, and it comes out of a moment of anger. It seems like Clara has a crush on him. He kind of scolds her for trying to kiss him, and she gets upset. And later, out of anger, tells another teacher, that he was inappropriate with her. This upsets everyone by no surprise. The truth eventually gets buried by a quick succession of everyone deciding what the truth is, that he molested many of the children in the kindergarten or the preschool, and that he's guilty and he's disgusting, and things just kind of spiral out of control. Clara later denies what happened and shows remorse, but everyone attributes this to her backtracking out of embarrassment and fear, and so we watch kind of the fallout of this for most of the movie thereafter. We watch his son Marcus try to grapple with this and try to support his father. His godfather, Bruin, try to help out Lucas as well. And even though Lucas is quickly cleared of the charges because of, inconsistent details about the children's stories, the town still shuns him. He's abused. A stone is thrown through his window. Somebody kills his dog and leaves it outside his house. He tries to maintain a sense of dignity and doesn't run away from the town, eventually attending Christmas Mass, where everyone in the town is present. He confronts Clara's father, Theo, in front of everyone and demands that, they leave him alone from now on. And then we see kind of a year time jump, after which he's pretty much been accepted back into the town. It's clear that Theo has forgiven him, and so has everyone else, or at least they've let it go. But it seems that he's not fully able to let it go, and the final shot we get is them out on another hunt, just like as the movie started, and someone tries to shoot at his head. And, I think he has a moment of realization that he'll never truly be free of the accusation. Anything to add?
Yeah, I would just say that shot was in my opinion, I thought it was like a warning shot. I don't think they were actually trying to kill him, but more like, hey, we still don't like you. We don't want you in this town. We want you to leave. That's how I took it.
Okay. So, Fahad,
yeah,
you think this movie is kind of digestible because pretty much from the get-go, we know that he is innocent and that nothing really happened, right?
Right.
I think I agree with you probably like about 60% of the way.
And because we share his perspective throughout the film, it makes it easier to accept that.
There's no doubt, right? You know that he didn't do anything.
Yeah,
right.
Well, also because they kind of the accusation that Clara makes is we know the root of it, like where it came from, right? Her
Right.
teenage brother and his friend were looking at pornographic images on like an iPad, and they showed it to her, which is weird as hell. But that's like where she saw it, and they made like a comment about it, and that's like the comment that she repeats to the teacher when she makes the accusation initially. So we also know, like, even then, there is no doubt that this guy, Lucas, has done nothing wrong. Clara, again, like Yusuf said, is upset because she kind of gets rejected, right? And she doesn't like that. Obviously, she doesn't like how that felt because she has a crush on him. She gives him like a heart in like an envelope, and he's like, "Hey, you should give this to another boy in the class." And like Yusuf mentioned, she kisses him on the lips, and he tells her, "You don't kiss people on the lips except for your parents or something."
Shout out to Tom Brady.
Tom Brady. Maybe it's common over there. I don't know. But yeah, so like we know from the get-go. But as Yusuf went through that narrative, that plot, the story, the entire arc of the story, I thought was so engaging start to finish, despite like, how simple of a story it is. Just seeing how each iteration of every moment, like I said, I was frustrated when I was watching this. Every moment that you think, all right, he's gonna get cleared right here, like it just gets it ratchets up another level, and he's ostracized even more so. It's just so frustrating every time it keeps happening, and you're like, all right, now his son's coming back. Maybe people will like begin to understand like he didn't do anything wrong. Oh, he has his girlfriend Naja. Maybe she'll help. She'll help him to like explain to the townspeople that who he is, like he has an alibi, whatever, anything. But nothing was working in his favor. Literally, scene after scene.
He doesn't even act in his own favor, right? He refuses to tell the whole context of that whole kiss and everything, and the letter that he received to anyone who would listen.
That he rejected her. Like I think
that
maybe
he rejected her, right?
Yeah,
and that could have explained it. That would have been the end of it in my mind.
When I'm watching the same thing, I almost didn't see any sort of out for him though. Like you
same.
saw the way that the initial reaction to the accusation was, and it almost seemed to me that if he opens his mouth about that incident, that is only going to inflame things further. There's going to be nothing to confirm his version. Rather, it's going to confirm from his own mouth that there was something happened, and that is just going to spiral out of control even more. It seemed to me every step of the way, Faraz, the way you're saying that every step you felt like, this is what's going to clear him. I almost kept thinking like, there's no way this clears him. Like there is nothing that can truly wash it away, is the way I felt. And it's like this, it feels like you're drowning almost when you're following him around in this. And it's like, there's just no way out of this. And everything, like you said, every single step is just making it worse and worse and digging it deeper. And he doesn't help himself, like you said, Fahad, right? Because he's angry, right? He's angry about what's happening to him. And so he, reaches out to different people. He goes to Theo's house and says, I want to talk to you about what actually happened. We need to deal with this. He's not willing to just lay down and take the consequences, which is right of him. But it also just gives them more, to feed on as they're kind of closing in on him. This movie is called The Hunt, right? And outside of going on, a hunting trip, at the beginning and end of the movie, they're talking about, right, the way that this town is going on, essentially a witch hunt, right?
Yep.
So there's almost no stopping that. I mean, it's mob mentality, and we all, I think in today's society, we're all very familiar with how powerful mob mentality is, right? And just how quickly it can escalate. This is that being embodied.
Yeah, and what's more frustrating is that this mob, it has this irrational moral certitude that something happened without any evidence, right? The police clears him, and they still possess that same belief that we should shun him, that he did something.
Right? Yeah, so that's actually one aspect of the movie that they did really well, right? So you have this accusation. Girth is her name. She's
Greta,
like the
I think.
She's the
main principal of the preschool, and she has a line where she says kids don't lie about things like this, and she thinks it's the right thing to do is to tell all the parents that something happened at the school, tell them to look at, like, observe their kids to see any signs of abuse if they have some. And it's almost like a self-fulfilling thing, right? Any if the kids have or show any kind of signs, it could be, for some other reasons, but they all just conclude to the same thing. And then the questions, right? The questions that she asks Clara, the leading questions, that counselor that she brings in to, corroborate, the questions or
the child psychologist. In that scene, she and both adults in that scene were asking leading questions and almost holding her hostage. She wanted to go back to recess, and they're like, no, you've got to talk to us, otherwise you can't go out there. And they forced a confession. Extremely unprofessional of both of them, right? Because the principal, in a scene prior, she tells Lucas, don't worry, we'll sort this out. We've got to follow the procedure. The truth will prevail. That's the essence of her message. But what does she do? She causes a panic. She gathers the parents preemptively before the police have conducted their investigation. She tells them all this stuff, right? I think the smarter move for her to do would be just permanently leave, send that Lucas on leave. Don't you think that'd be the more responsible?
I mean, you don't blame response? Her, right?
Do I blame her? Kind of.
I think. Well, really? So I think I do, not for the course of action she chose, but her execution of it, because Fahad just laid out exactly what she said, that, look, we're going to do this by the book. We're going to find evidence. We're going to do a full investigation. But it's, not 5 minutes later in the film, at least, that she is saying, like, he did this disgusting thing and we have to tell everyone. And she even says, I think we've all decided that he did it. Like, and it's very quick that she comes to that. And, there's several shouting matches, not just with her, but with others, where they're just like, you're a disgusting person. Get away. We don't need to ever see you again. And it's like, which part of that were you planning on, where are you doing the investigation if you're never going to speak to him again? I wasn't fully understanding, what they meant by that. And I think the truth is that as much as they pretended they were going by the book, they had their minds made up. And so I think that's where I falter. And this is also where I wanted to talk about how uncomfortable and upsetting this material was. Like, we have to acknowledge a story like this. Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, the major thing going on here is confirmation bias in everyone, right? Is that what you were going to say?
No, it wasn't. That's a very good point. But
okay.
Wait, go ahead. Go ahead.
Sure. I mean, everyone in their conversations, they're just looking for more evidence that he had done it. So when the child psychologist and the principal were talking to her, they almost force her to confess, right? And then in subsequent conversations where it's Lucas and the father, what's his face? Theo, right. I don't exactly remember his conversation too well. Do you guys, was there any confirmation bias?
Lucas is basically saying, like, hey, I'm telling the truth here. And Theo's like, well, my little girl doesn't lie. Why would she lie about this? I would say you guys said you do fault the principal for the way she executed the investigation. The thing is, like, think about the other way if Clara's accusation was true.
Wait.
We're getting sidetracked.
Yeah.
You said go with your point.
Let's talk about the confirmation bias thing first, because we really need to talk about that. But okay. So the other part where there's a lot of confirmation bias is the fact that they lay out that, okay, look, she's not answering our questions the way that we thought she was. She says nothing happened now. That must be her being afraid of the truth, right? So as she says it once, and then anytime after that, when she backtracks, it's attributed to how severe the incident must have been, that she's trying to forget it, trying to put it out of her mind.
She's suppressing it.
Right. So like that's
it was with the mother, right? The mother refusing to hear Clara recant her accusation.
Right. I mean, and even in the questioning with the counselor, right? The same thing kind of happens where she's saying, no, nothing happened. And they're like, I understand, but you need to tell us what happened. And something did happen, right? And so there is a lot of confirmation bias. But for us, we do have to consider the other side of this coin, right? A story like this is probably so unbelievably rare that I almost dislike the whole concept of making a movie from this perspective, because it suggests that this is plausible, that somebody can get kind of, they can get, what's the word I'm looking for? I mean,
accused.
well, they can get between a rock and a hard spot in this way when they're totally innocent, as though this is the real danger, right? The reality is that they have to take a child's accusation so seriously because of what the cost is of not taking it seriously, right?
Yeah.
And so like you were alluding to earlier, the other way to go about this would basically, be at the worst interest of the children, who should be the foremost interest here. And that's why it's so important to take those accusations seriously. It's only from our perspective, knowing in this specific case, that we know that, there really was there was nothing that had occurred. There was no danger. And that's part of why it's so frustrating.
Sure. But does treating something seriously mean to take preemptive action?
Right.
Seriously could mean taking the professional action, following up with the police, firing that person, or just putting that person on leave and just separating the two. No further abuse can take place, right? Would that be the extent of a logical person's actions? I think so.
Well, you got to consider. So when she does tell the rest of the parents at the school about what may have happened, the other parents are saying
that's the other thing. She doesn't tell the other parents what may have happened. She tells them what happened. The language she uses in that meeting, it's so frustrating because it's all certainty there. There's no room for doubt.
The incident happened here, and so you need to observe your children and see if you see any signs. And then obviously,
and the signs, by the way, right, are headaches and nightmares and wetting the bed.
Yeah, basically, stuff that obviously probably does fall in line with the situation they're talking about, but also kind of broad.
Right, when that's all you have to go on, it could mean a lot of things, right? And sure enough, a lot of the parents come back and say, we're noticing the symptoms, and
then what do kids do, right? Like the whole how the accusation, this was the most crazy part to me, is when they come back and tell Lucas, like, well, now there's like 4, 5, 6 kids that are saying that you did something, and it's because kids talk on the playground. They start like rumors come out, they start making up stories, and
their stories align.
Their stories are aligned because they're talking about it together.
Right. In this movie, they talk about how the kids all agreed that Lucas had a basement where he abused them, and the wallpaper was one color. And then subsequently, it's revealed that Lucas doesn't have a basement, right?
Yeah. And exactly. Those are the inconsistencies that lead to the police dismissing the case.
Mm-hmm.
I do think, though, it just, like, there's something about watching this guy and his horrible situation, which is really a tragedy of society, right? But it's like, just imagine that, like, somebody's making a film about this, and from this perspective, and this is why you shouldn't this is why you should be careful about accusations from children. And it's like, that's totally the wrong approach, right? I mean, if this happened, this is the lesser of two evils, by without a doubt, right? Because it's just way more important to take accusations and anything that may have happened to a child much, much, much more seriously. So I found myself frustrated by the subject matter itself in a lot of moments because of that, because you truly do feel sympathy for him. But at the same time, like, I was just like, why is this guy making this movie from this perspective, as if like this is the real danger, I guess. But I do have to credit him.
So
he's made 2 movies on sexual abuse, and the first one was about an incident that did indeed occur. And it's kind of the same setup where it's like, it's about the ramifications of an accusation coming out. So he didn't only make the movie from this perspective. He's done it before. That was his first big film, I believe. So
right, he told it from the exact opposite perspective, right? Yeah, it's about an accusation not being believed and the consequences there.
And that movie's called Festin, by the way, or The Celebration, if you're looking it up in English. It's a 1998 film. So that was Thomas Vinterberg's first film. But yeah, so he's kind of done he's done 2 movies in that same space. I actually read that he had to see a psychologist just for personal reasons, and the psychologist had previously, after Festin came out, given him like a proposal for a movie taking a totally different approach to the same kind of issues and same kind of problems in society, and then so like literally 14 years later, because of just personal reasons, he happened to run into this guy again, and he was like, hey, about that movie. And then they made it. So cool. But yeah, I just wanted to point out he has made it from the other perspective, but I just did find myself a little bit frustrated with the perspective itself.
With the subject matter, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll credit, though, also, by the way, the Godfather, whose name I will have to remember right now because it's going to bother me. Brune, right? Yeah, okay. So I do have to credit that the Godfather of Marcus, Brune, does seem to recognize this. And he actually mentions in a scene that, everyone here needs to work from the presumption that children are telling the truth because, sadly, very often they are. So they do recognize that sentiment within this movie as well. So I think when I heard that, it was a little bit redemptive to the kind of the feeling I was having.
Okay. Yeah, and in that scene, I think they're in the basement, and he's like chopping some food or something, cutting some carrots or onions, and then there's like this moment of tenseness because they don't know what the police are going to decide. I think in that scene, the Godfather is truly worrying that Lucas might have done something, but the tension is quickly broken by the following morning when everyone knows that they released him, the inconsistencies with the children's stories, right?
Yeah, that's the night that that Lucas goes to jail. He's arrested, and like his hearing is like the following morning, where
Right.
it would be decided if the case would move forward or not. I mean, Yusuf, you said something that was very, very true. You called it a tragedy of society, and something that was like hard to watch, because when you see like someone like Theo, or even like his close friends or other parents or the principal reacting the way they did, there's some, you can kind of understand it. But when you saw people like at the grocery store, like a grocery store manager, the butcher at the grocery store, like these guys like beating him up, just straight ostracizing him, having no connection to him personally. Like that's the stuff that was like, man, this is going so far beyond like what you would expect.
Yeah, that's
But
a true
again,
Bob,
it is a
right?
smaller town. Those are the villains, really, right? Because you wouldn't say Clara's a villain here. You wouldn't say Theo is a
Not at
villain
all.
here, or the principal, right? None of these people
Right.
are acting in any way that is not normal or reasonable from their perspective.
Right.
But for me, like when I saw the way like some of those townspeople were reacting towards Lucas, I would call that kind of unreasonable, considering they have zero information other than rumors, and they have no connection to like the people themselves.
Yeah.
I would only say that we're set up to think this is kind of like an idyllic small Danish town where everyone knows everyone. From that regard, it doesn't really, we can't really draw a line between the workers at the store and the main characters. It's almost like they're all neighbors, essentially, right?
Yeah, like the store manager's reasoning is like, I can't have customers seeing, you in here.
Right.
Because the other customers know who you are.
Yeah, and then, I mean, the scenes in the grocery store, or at least the final one where, they literally shove him out and they're throwing cans of food at his face. That was so hard to watch. I mean, that was where I felt kind of my frustration peaking, I think, because you're totally right where, their reactions seemed the most vile. They were doing it more out of pleasure than anything else at that point.
Exactly.
And so there was something particularly, disgusting about their reactions. But I would almost say that although no one, in the immediate circle is particularly at fault, they're not the villain. It's almost their actions in the aggregate that, is the real evil, right? Because none of them do anything individually that's totally out of line, but as a whole, they shun him from society, and they take no precaution to make sure that his side of things are heard or anything like that, and that is where they lose the truth. So it's hard to say, but yeah, essentially none of them are the villain, but together they're all the villain is how I felt.
Yeah, so I had in my notes, there's one protagonist and the antagonist is society as a whole.
Yeah. I think I could jive with that.
With Theo, I would say he was the one who was kind of like at every moment you felt like he has some reservations about what he thinks may have happened, and but he acts like Yusuf said, he acts as if Lucas has done it, and obviously being the father of the girl that made the accusation, totally reasonable. But at the same time, like that same scene where Lucas gets cans thrown at his face and Lucas is walking away. Theo's in the car and he wants to go up and talk to him. Theo's not the kind of guy who is going around swinging punches at him, despite him being the one who would probably have the most reason to if he believes the accusations. So I don't know. I thought Theo's character was like a really, really nice, like a plot device that kind of bridged, how we as an audience member felt, kind of, and at the same time understanding the situation that these people are in.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. He understandably is also Lucas's best friend, and so he has a hard time stomaching, either situation. He can't stand the fact that this has happened to his daughter. He also can't stand the fact that it wouldn't have, he's just stuck between two alternatives that neither one is satisfied. Neither one is satisfactory, right? It's either he loses his best friend or he has to not support his daughter, I guess, right? So it's so hard to be in his shoes. I think he's the one in the town that you understand where he's coming from. I think where I scored it down on narrative, and since I gave it an 85, I'm being picky and choosy here. I think where I scored it down, I found it kind of anticlimactic that in the end, Theo says a line in the church about, I can see it in his eyes that he didn't do it, basically. And that is what leads to Theo forgiving him, or not forgiving him since he didn't do anything, but believing him and moving past it and showing him some compassion.
There is that scene in the beginning of the movie when Theo is asking Lucas about Kristen, his ex-wife, and he's like, I know you're lying. You do that thing with your eyes when you blink, when you lie. I just kind of attributed it to that. Like, when he says, I can see it in his eyes.
Yeah.
He knows, like, when he lies, he has this little twitch about his blinking. So
right. And in that church scene,
he's
making like direct eye contact for like 30 seconds or something like that.
Yeah. They're
he's
not
like,
looking away.
Right.
Yeah, that's true. I guess they did set that up. I still feel it's kind of a little bit weak to after, given the gravity of these accusations and the fact that, there's just no hard evidence to go on, and that's kind of what spirals things out of control, to then be like, actually, saw his eyes, guys. He's good. I mean, that, and then we also, more so than that, I think, we don't get to see how the public sentiment turns back in his favor, because there's just a 1-year time jump, and after that, we see that, things are relatively normal. He's shaking up with the guys who beat him up earlier.
Oh, let's talk about that scene. He's in that that house that's next to the hunting property, right? His son's godfather's property.
Yeah.
Right, and everyone's like having a merry time. They're drinking, they're laughing.
You guys, what about? Like, are you gonna get to the scene where, like, they're presenting the rifle to Marcus?
Yeah, I'm talking about that
Lucas'
very
son?
scene. Just like moments before, he scans over the table of his friends. They're laughing, but he looks uneasy. He's like, he can't seem to accept his friends back because he knows that this is it's like a thin friendship at this point.
I feel like when they were showing the other people in the room before they panned over to Lucas himself, we saw a few people, glancing over at Lucas with like a
side eye.
Not so much, not really a sad eye, but like not suspicious, but at the same time not friendly. Like they had a look to them that they still had some doubts about him.
Mm-hmm. One of those characters was Theo's son. He's in the back.
Theo's son was one of them, and that really big dude that beat up Marcus, that really big friend.
Yeah, that's
of his.
Jonas, right?
The
one who slapped Marcus several times, and now he's attending basically a ceremony for Marcus, right? They're giving him his hunting license, I guess. That's what, which is, I guess, just kind of a societal thing. It's like it's a becoming a man type thing.
Yeah, it's like a quinceañera for guys.
Yeah, or a bar mitzvah, or getting a
coming of age
license. I don't know
thing.
Yeah,
right.
So I think so basically, you guys are pointing out different ways in which they show that there's still tension there, right?
Right.
He feels it, but also everyone else feels it. I noticed it the most in the lead up to that scene. They get out of the car. Him, Marcus, and Nadia get out of the car. They're walking up and greeting everybody, and everybody that that Lucas greets, they're even hugging. They're shaking hands and they're hugging, but like it's just very careful acting. They did a great job where they do
It
this
feels
thing where
false.
they're hugging, but
Yeah.
they're looking away from each other as they hug, and then as they separate, they just keep looking away from each other.
Yeah,
And
they're not making eye
It's a
contact.
clear formality.
Mm.
The tensions have been quelled, but things aren't okay. Lucas knows that he was never given a fair shake, and that's too much for him, right? He's not going to be able to forgive everyone. At the same time, everyone hasn't moved past the accusation that they've put on him either. So that obviously comes to a head at the very last scene where they're in the middle of the forest hunting, and somebody shoots right above his head, basically right into the tree, and he
Mhm.
sees somebody standing there. It just can see a silhouette, can't tell who it is. You guys have any guesses who it was?
Yeah, I'm gonna guess that it's Theo's son.
Okay.
Mm.
He in that scene where the table scene, he averts his gaze really quickly, as if he's
Okay.
planning something.
Is he older than Marcus? Would he have his
He's
hunting license?
he's about at the same age, slightly older maybe.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna speculate to who it was. I just, my idea was people still they still don't want him around, even if they don't believe that he did anything wrong. But the fact that he was accused of it is enough for them to be like, leave.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's just like the accusation is the conviction, right? To me, it looked the most like Theo. That makes no sense from the narrative perspective. So I know it's not Theo, but it looked the most like him to me, unless there's like something symbolic going on where, basically Theo's inability to defend his best friend, has basically has ended his time in that society, in that community, right? Unless there's something symbolic going on like that, I don't know. But I can't figure that it was Theo. But I don't think it looked like anybody else particularly that we've seen as a major player in this movie. But yeah, like I did like where they ended it, because I think it would have been too much for it to just be like, yeah, things have moved on and everything's great, right? So I think they left it at a good point.
Mads Mikkelsen's acting in that scene was incredible as well, because he has that look in him where he's ready to die. He's like, all right, I'm about to get shot in the head right now, and I'm about to be dead. But then the guy doesn't shoot, right? He just walks away.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I guess, yeah. I mean, he's just, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, he's almost consigned to it, because it's almost, there's nothing that's going to get him past this at this point, right?
Yeah.
I did like what they did a couple times, and this gets into the aesthetics a little bit. The silence that you hear when they're out hunting in the forest, that silence is nowhere else in this movie, and they do a good job of contrasting that, especially at the opening of the movie, how silent it is, just immediately turning into the loud, clamoring of these large Danish men, downing beers, right, and singing jolly songs. They did that so much. It was like somebody was screaming in your ear. And the only time there was peace was out there in the forest, and the human presence interrupted that so well. Again, just that's symbolically pointing the blame, or the pollution is coming from society itself, from humans, right, from people. I really did like that. I mean, because if you're looking at it from the standpoint of the innocence of an animal, which they are hunting, right, there's pure innocence in those animals, but they're hunted and they're killed nonetheless. And that's exactly what happens to Lucas here, right? Despite his absolute innocence, the accusation is enough to end things for him.
The hunter
Yeah,
becomes
that's
the
a really
hunted.
good point.
Yeah. I
Is
guess
that what
so.
you're going for?
No, but I mean that works.
Okay.
Where did we land on aesthetics again? I think I'm pretty low, right?
I landed on 80.
Yeah, you gave it below average. Fahad at above at 80, and I was at average at 70.
I guess I should
So-
mention a couple of things. If you're done, Lucas or Yusuf, I just wanted to note that the movie was mostly shot handheld. It focused mostly on the characters and their faces. Right, we don't get many establishing shots to get a sense of space. It's entirely focused on the character drama. So it's mostly like a zoom in shot. Right, it makes sense because the movie's focused on the conflict between people, and so the cinematography works there. What else did I have to say? Oh, the close-up shots where we get to study Lucas's face, that all works because you can sense the turmoil in him. With the lighting choices, do you guys remember the mob scene in the grocery store?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so the people who were after him, the lighting on their faces was their entire faces were lit, and that differs from the rest of the movie. The rest of the movie, all the characters have like a shadow, like a directional lighting on their faces, and I think that's to indicate that with a fully lit face, there's moral certainty, and with a shadowy face, it's there's a sense of doubt, right? I think that's what they're going for, and with in the mob scene, those guys are possessed with a certainty that Lucas is a predator.
I like that, by the way,
Very, very
because
good points.
it's
Yeah.
like, yeah, I mean, again, like we talked about, the mob as a whole is certain. Individuals, not so much. As a unit, they're more certain than any one of them individually is, and that is what causes that's what causes this type of situation. Yeah, Fahad, you mentioned a lot about the close-ups on the faces.
Yeah.
I think the reason I scored it where I did, we mentioned all the things that I liked. The nature shots interspersed throughout the film were good. The use of silence was good. What I didn't like is that I just didn't notice much else, and part of that is because of the amount of close-up shots that they use. Totally relies on the actors to provide kind of the emotion and the drama, which is great, and I think they do a great job of that. But I wouldn't attribute any of that to the aesthetics. So I scored it down because I was like, if somebody was coming in to watch, good cinematography in this movie, they're probably not going to see a whole lot of it. They do see cinematography that is chosen well for the movie, but just cinematography that doesn't do much because it lets the actors do their thing. So I guess that's kind of why I left it where I did, because the actors are able to convey with their faces, with their voices. But I didn't think there was very much else to be gained from each frame beyond the actors themselves.
Yeah, for sure. We don't get any like shots where you like set up the environment, right? Where you get a sense of space. It's always on people. The camera's always focused on people, which makes for a less pretty movie.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's purposeful, right? They definitely made a conscious decision to do that. I'm not giving them points for the thing that they didn't do, which is kind of, use more camera angles and styles to develop more style to the look of the film, right? They just chose not to do that, and they chose to let the actors be the center, and they were successful in doing that.
Yeah, guys, I want to talk a little bit about Clara and her situation which leads to her accusation that Lucas did some inappropriate things. We see that Lucas is a really, really good guy, right? He's like a stand-up guy. He's really good with kids. He's very friendly. He's very helpful. And it's really this that, leads people to believe that, or people to think that perhaps the accusations could be true, is because he spends so much time with the kids. And why is he spending time with the kids? One is because, well, with Clara specifically, is because Theo and his wife Agnes, I believe, they're constantly fighting and bickering. Theo drinks a lot. I guess they all kind of drink a lot. But
they're bad parents.
Theo kind of yeah, they're kind of detached. And like they're not giving any attention to her. It seems like her brother gets quite a bit of attention because he's always with his mom. Like she's taking him to soccer practice or whatever. And there's this one scene where Clara's waiting outside to be taken to school, and neither of her parents know where she is, and they're arguing in the house. And Lucas comes walking by, and he's like, "Do you need me to walk you to school?" And Clara's like, "Yeah." So he calls up Theo. He's like, "Hey, your daughter's out here. I'm gonna take her to school."
And the dad doesn't even know she's outside, right?
Yeah, he's like, "Where is she?"
Yeah.
If you heard the yelling coming from inside the house, it was literally something Theo is saying to Agnes that, you're the one that wanted to have kids. You take them to school. And it's like,
yeah.
Like, I mean,
they're basically arguing about who's responsible
about her
for
existence. Yeah. So
my God.
I totally agree with you.
So
So I'm just saying that's set up, right?
Yeah.
To have Clara, who is seeking attention, she's getting it from Lucas. So when Lucas does kind of reject her and say, "Look, you can't kiss, people like me on the lips. You can't be giving out like hearts to people like me," she really like is upset by it. And again, this is why none of us would ever say that Clara did anything I mean, she told a lie, of course,
But kids tell lies, and that's excusable.
yeah, but
right?
kids tell lies, exactly. And when the principal says that kids don't tell lies about this, it's also alluding to another thing within our society that we're underestimating like what kids are exposed to. So I can
Yeah.
see like why the principal would be like, well, how could she say such a comment about, a man's penis? Well, we see exactly why that's so like possible because they show when that happened with Clara. I mean, I just thought the entire setup for the accuser
Mm-hmm.
in this situation was crafted very well for the entire narrative.
Mm-hmm. Do we ever get the sense that the kid will be reprimanded for doing what he did? Right, the brother showing that stuff to Clara. No,
Oh,
right?
no.
Because
I don't
it's
think
probably
so.
not even known, right?
Right. It's
Right. No
it's
one
like-
ever finds out that, he made that exact comment to Clara just in a manner of teasing her, and he showed her something inappropriate, and just to tease her, said that out loud.
Mhm.
Yeah, we don't get any sense that anyone knows about it, or and even further that, her parents, of all parents who are clearly not very good parents, are going to step in and stop that, and kind of discipline their son. It's just probably not going to happen. Probably will never come up. And so, but it also seems like Clara is not going to be deeply affected by this, right? It seems like she's okay, and she has a relationship with Lucas after this, and they're okay again, right? I don't know if that lasts, because I don't think Lucas is going to he's not going to survive in that town, by the looks of it at the end, right? But it seems like she's been able to move past it too.
Yeah.
It's not too like late after, right? Like we already talked about this, how when the counselor when the principal brings in a counselor to talk to her, she's already contradicting herself and saying like, well, nothing happened. And then when she's talking to her mom, like privately, she's like, I just said something stupid. And then it's really that Christmas Eve scene, right, where Theo goes to her bed and she's like half asleep, thinks it's Lucas coming up to her. And, again, she repeats that, she said something stupid. It wasn't true. And I think Theo's the only one that kind of believes it because he goes over to Lucas's house right after with some dinner to talk to him.
Okay, but
Yeah.
if you weren't sure whether Lucas did it or not, like, wouldn't that incident kind of be like in the camp of like, okay, something definitely happened? Because I just tried to walk into my daughter's room and she greeted me as Lucas when she saw a shadow coming into her room. Like,
Oh, man.
that's what I kept thinking. I was
I
just like,
didn't-
no, this is gonna go downhill again. You know what I mean?
Oh, yes, that was another step that makes you more frustrated.
Yeah, like, I mean, if Theo wasn't internally convinced by the eyes and the eyes alone that he didn't do it, like, what about that moment would make you think like, oh, I guess Lucas, he's just an okay guy. Granted, Clara seemed happy she seemed happy when she greeted Theo as Lucas. She was saying, hi, Lucas, like she was excited. But still, it
Yeah,
was just like
that's
this
scary.
moment where it's like, that's all it takes. That is literally all it takes for something to spiral.
I don't remember if Theo sees her, but like right before she says Lucas, right? She sees the dog. I forgot what the dog's name
Fanny,
was.
yeah. So
Yeah, Fanny. She says Fanny, so I don't know. Maybe Theo heard that and then like heard Lucas, and he
Right.
just
At what point Fanny's
a little
dead
more
at this point,
innocent.
right? So Clara
Yeah.
is seeing things, and she obviously has some guilt about everything that's going on. She has some understanding of the consequences of what she said, which is why she keeps telling everyone, "I just said something stupid." I thought that writing was a little bit too smart for a child in a lot of ways, because she was so adamant and so stern on the fact that, look, nothing happened. I did something that I shouldn't have done. It was too much clarity for a child, I guess, for a child who probably was a little unsure what was going on. But nonetheless, I just wanted to point out, like, yeah, she's clearly got some serious guilt for what's happening, because she's seeing things, and she's not, she's a little bit
she's
messed up.
seeing someone she really likes. She likes Lucas, right? And she's just seeing him being shunned from society, being physically abused, yelled at. She sees that her dad's friendship with him has ended. So yeah, for sure, she's probably gonna be having, some guilt
And
about
she
what
she loves the dog too. She loves Fanny, and
Yeah,
Fanny,
she goes over to his house after the accusation and everything when Nadia's at Lucas's house, and she's like, "Can I walk Fanny?"
Yeah, that scene bothered me a little bit because I was like, okay, so this girl has just accused somebody of molesting her, and then once again just walks out of the house in her coat and her hat and her gloves and walks over to the accused's house
Her
to
parents don't know where she is.
they literally are not watching her at all. Like after those accusations come out, she still gets out of her house like that without anyone realizing. And then again in that scene, I'm thinking somebody's gonna walk by and see her at his house again and think he's like basically kidnapped her again. You know, like who?
I was thinking the opposite, Yusuf. This is where Fahad, when you said that Lucas doesn't help himself, why doesn't Lucas pick up his phone and like, hey, your daughter just walked over to my house. Can you come grab her?
Right.
Like, why would you not do that right away?
Yeah, that
like,
one for sure. Right?
I have a
Like,
witness here too.
Another
today. I have a
another
witness.
frustrating thing happened in that scene. Nadia begins to doubt him, right? And I'm thinking to myself, what about that interaction causes more doubt?
I think it's the fact that she came to his house, like Yusuf said, just seeing her alone with Lucas.
I don't know.
And like maybe Nadia has the idea, like, has she come here before, by herself?
Yeah, I guess.
Maybe.
But I did find myself in that scene, just like Nadia, what the hell's wrong with you? Like that was not the right thing to say then, and it obviously upsets him. But like again, yeah, it's like if you had doubts, you had doubts. But what in that moment makes you say it then? I don't know. Yeah, I guess I could see it both ways. But more so, it's just their emotions. Both of them, it gets the best of them, right? She doesn't want to be, as already being an outsider in that community, like be the one whose boyfriend is a child molester, right? So she asks the question at the same time, like that was the one person that he needed to just not doubt him, right? So I can see just the emotions boiling over.
I think that's a great point for the entire movie. Almost with every character, you can see it both ways.
Yeah, that's true.
More about the motifs with the light, right? In that scene where Clara is sitting by herself in the principal's office, she's sitting in the dark. Do you guys remember that scene?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's the first moment where the principal has her suspicions about whether or not something happened. Well, as Clara's telling her lies, the principal's standing in a well-lit hallway, and as Clara's telling the story, right, and she mentions, not the accusation, but she mentions something about the pornography, right? Some comment her brother made, right? The principal's...
Well, she says that, he has a penis, he has a willy, and the principal's like, well, all boys do,
But she
so-and-so
mentions
has one,
the
so-and-so.
hard-on or whatever.
And exactly. And she mentions like, well, it was an erection.
Right.
And then that's where the principal's like, whoa, like, why are you saying that?
Right. And so I was just going to mention the lighting situation there. She's sitting in the dark Yule's lies, and then the principal's, she's in a well-lit hallway, and she's peering into that dark room. And in that scene, she's walking closer and closer into the dark room. Yeah, I thought they played with the light and the dark well there.
I think we already kind of addressed the broad themes in this movie in terms of just the outfall, or the how much a simple accusation how much harm it can cause, right?
Mm-hmm.
But did you guys see a lot deeper beyond that? Because I think I'm probably again the lowest on themes here, if I'm not mistaken.
I saw some themes of sexism present.
Yeah.
Like this single divorced father, he's struggling to get more custody of his son, and then we see abusive parents like not care about Clara, right? It's like society has deemed single fathers to be incapable of caring for children, where Lucas is like so great with the kids, so great with the nursery kids, right?
Yeah, I mean, I probably did give themes the highest. I give it 100, and it's not so much for the themes themselves or it's really the execution of it. I just thought it was masterful because, like Yusuf said, we're talking about something that's pretty touchy, uncomfortable, but like the entire idea of the court of like public opinion and like how much that carries weight, despite all the facts. And how it can stick with you, like if there is a such thing as redemption for certain things, like how a reputation can be ruined and tarnished, like all of that, it's part of the movie, and how it's presented is just super well executed.
Yeah, there's something just general there where you can apply this to a lot of things, but just the idea that humans judging humans is a flawed art, inherently, basically, right? We're just never going to get it right. And the more we try to judge each other, the more we screw up, right? And so it's certainly it's an indictment on the court of public opinion, right? I mean, the more we try to hold one another as righteous over others, this is the type of stuff that results. So yeah, I think they did a good job of depicting that. I mean, if I just, and I hate to just go on like a gut check, but if I just go on like a gut check, the way I felt from start to finish in this movie, and like just the sense of dread you feel for this guy, that should tell you how well executed the themes were. So I mean, I was by no means low on the themes. I think I was the lowest, but
we
I
all
still
thought
had
they
an
were
80,
good.
so pretty good. One scene that I really liked in that regard was that scene at Clara's bedside where Theo, late at night, he goes into her room, right, and he's just kind of talking to her, and she admits that she made it all up. At some point, he says, "The world is full of evil, but if we hold on to each other, it goes away," right? Towards the end of the film, he says that, and that's supposed to be like a comforting thing. We band together and we can banish evil. The whole movie, what did we actually watch? The exact opposite. Everyone banded together, and when they held on to one another, they created the evil. They created the lie that ruined this guy's life, right? So, it's actually the fact that it was great irony in that scene. The fact that we think, in our numbers, we make one another strong. The reality is that's not always true. As much as that's a great, a great motivating speech, right, to say something like that. When we band together, we intensify whatever is already in us, and sometimes that's evil, right? Sometimes that's doubt and gossip and whatever you may have. But when we band together, it's not always a positive incident. Is kind of the irony that they're showing there.
Yeah, it's one of those truisms, right?
Point.
It's a statement that sounds right, but under further scrutiny, it's not necessarily.
Yeah, it doesn't hold up.
Yeah, definitely. So I think that they had a few little moments like that where I thought, that's really good introspection, and really, it also ties into the overall theme, right? It's not just kind of this random deep moment. It actually fits very well in, but they're making a separate point there by saying that. So I liked it.
The film also, right? There's several moments where people are confronting one another. No one ever changes their minds in conversations. I think that's another observation of this movie, that people don't have the capacity to have an open mind in a conversation. They already have their preconceived notions, and they come into a conversation just looking for more bias to strengthen their own position. Example of that would be Lucas and Theo. They weren't even able to begin to talk about the accusation without getting riled up.
Yeah, and
example of that is us on this podcast when we disagree on things and we just find any sort of argument to throw in our favor. I mean, no, but it's a really good point, right? What is an open mind? When people say, "Oh, come at this with an open mind," does anybody really do that, or is that just something you say, right? I think most of the time it is something you kind of say. It's impossible to just drop your biases at the door a lot of times.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but it's also the subject matter here. Again, like the situation that people find themselves in. I mean, it's hard to have an open mind, which I think is reasonable in this situation. Obviously, not for other things.
Yeah, 100% true. I mean, this is taking that type of situation to its its logical extreme, right? And in this one, there almost is there is no room to really doubt oneself. At least in the interest of a child, right? You have to put that doubt out of your mind. I wouldn't agree with the way that Greta carries herself as a whole, but the fact that she chooses to take Clara's word as truth and at least begin, at that starting point, it's 100% the right approach, right? There's all sorts of other things that come in, just the general ability to gossip, to look at look at oneself as holier than thou. All those things come in after the fact, though, right? But that's just the human nature aspect of it that we see play out.
So the film didn't make a big deal of this, but want to get your opinions. What do you guys think of Lucas's son being abused by his father's former friends?
Ooh, can we speculate here? I like this.
Yeah, do it. It's a little bit of hypocrisy, right? Because this movie's
that they don't believe
all about
him, but they believe
right.
the
It's
other
all
kid.
about it's concerned about child abuse. One's of a sexual nature and one's of a physical nature.
I saw it more where it was. I mean, you're right about that, but also on top of that, guilt by association. So it's not just that Lucas has been told to not shop at that grocery store. Marcus is told, "Hey, don't come back. Like I don't want other store customers to see you here." So yeah, it's guilt by association for someone who is clearly innocent, right? He's not even in the same town when these accusations are
And what do you
made.
make of the physical abuse?
I mean, I just see that as emotions, like getting a little too riled up because what leads to the physical abuse? It's when he
He spit.
Marcus crosses some lines. Yeah.
Marcus
Yeah, he
crosses some
crosses the
lines.
line,
he
right?
spits on the girl, and then he
yeah, exactly. It's
he's
right after
thrown
that.
out of the
That's what I
house.
thought.
The adults are following him out, and they're yelling at him. And I guess impulsively he slaps it. One of them, the big dude, right?
Yeah, the big
But how
dude.
much is a
Yeah.
kid slap gonna hurt? And the guy just starts
I mean, it's
wailing
not.
on him, right? He pushes him on the ground. He starts delivering blows, like
So-
2-3 man-sized blows that can knock someone out.
And the reason I said we're going to get into speculation is because I think that points to a larger pattern. Like that doesn't just happen in a one-off. The way that he slapped him, picked him up, and slapped him multiple times again.
Uh-huh.
I don't think that was
Oh,
the first time that Marcus was
he's done it
abused,
to
and I
his own
don't think
kid.
he's the only one of the boys in this film that were exposed to that type of behavior.
Yeah.
Especially, I mean, we're just led to believe there's a lot of anger, there's a lot of drinking in this town, and there is violence that we see on screen. So yeah, it's another type of abuse. I think you have to conclude that there's more of that going around than just what we saw, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, for sure, because actually they allude to it when Lucas, I forget who. I think Clara says something to Lucas. Yeah, I think it's when she goes over to his house, right, by herself to walk Fanny, and she says something. He's like, "Wait, what are the others that you're talking about?" I forget what she says. Do you guys know what I'm talking about?
So she,
Like she almost alludes that there were others, or like there was another instance of like abuse of some sort.
right. Well, so
and
I think basically what ends up happening, if we take a step back, is Clara comes out with this accusation. Greta goes and talks to the other parents and says, let me know if you notice any symptoms, because there may have been more instances of that. As a result, they all go and talk to their kids or whatever, and a bunch of the kids come back and say that they were also abused, and that there was this incident in Lucas's basement, and I can describe his basement. So I think she's referring to the other kids that are now saying that they were also abused. So I think that's what she's referring to there. I'm not sure she was talking about physical abuse specifically there. I did want to raise the question though, just based on something bothered me about the way all the kids agreed on a bunch of facts. I mean, I understand that kids kind of talk about things and they have imaginations, but it almost raised the question to me, and this is something that there's not going to be hard evidence of this in the film, but I think it's reasonable speculation. Are some of these kids being abused by someone?
Yeah, that's what I concluded myself.
Okay.
Wait,
Yeah,
what?
I-
Really?
Yeah.
I think part of it is the kids are all suppressing. If something happens to them, they are likely going to try to suppress those thoughts and the memory of those events. But they all come up with the same description of a basement with wallpaper. I almost wanted to watch this movie again, look for every shot of like wallpaper that you get, because I almost wonder if there's a clean shot of like some very unique wallpaper somewhere, kind of triggering you that like maybe the abuse happened from somebody else, and now these kids, when being asked about were you abused by Lucas, they're misattributing it.
I saw it.
That's almost kind of what popped into my head. Because you can go ahead, Fahad. I think there's definitely room to
Sure.
to
So-
explain it away as well. But
So I thought of it this way. Like one kid mentioned some trivial detail about a wallpaper. They go to the playground and they mention it to their friend. And what happens, they both end up sharing the details and incorporating that detail into their stories. As more kids listen in and share stories, right? There's almost like this group consensus of the details, and that it's a part of everyone's story. Because no investigation was conducted, right? These kids, they're all talking to one another, and there was no one single time in which all their stories were recorded. So they had a chance to, like, I guess, agree on the details. That's how I thought it. It was almost like group delusion.
Yeah, but that seems a little malicious in the way that it turns out, I guess. And I mean, obviously, it's
Not from a
necessarily
malicious place, but
on the children's
no,
standpoint.
I'm not
right?
saying it's from a malicious place. It's just that they convinced each other that something happened. They're kids.
Let me meet you halfway.
Okay.
Several of them were abused, and when one of them, Clara, says that it was Lucas that abused me, the rest of them incorporate that detail into their stories.
Okay.
There's certainly an aspect of reaching a consensus of fact here, right? And the question is which facts were fabricated and which ones were and which ones were accurate. There's almost like if you have one truth among all the the misguided statements, that one piece of truth ends up confirming some of those misguided statements, right? But we can't sit here and parse which ones are which. But yeah, it's just like I thought there was something to that where they were kind of dangling that out there a little bit, that maybe something's going on. And again, there's no way to know because like you said, those details, it's all just from talking and talking, and then eventually as a group there becomes some sort of agreed upon story. Yeah, I just thought that was interesting that maybe something is under the surface there where something more sinister is going on, and it wasn't just this misunderstanding.
Okay.
It's just that they had their targets on the wrong person.
Yeah, I'm gonna conclude for myself that same exact thing, that there is something that may have happened, and then it's just this is a triggering event, and again, the accusation was just against the wrong person.
All right, we've confirmed it 100%.
I mean, it's just the idea that I can't imagine every single one of those kids to be making it up. That's really what it is, right?
Yeah, like it seems like a coordinated effort almost at that point. And it just seemed a little odd to me, unless all those kids had some reason to believe that they had experienced something like that, right? And so it comes to my mind where it's like every one of those kids had to have like one of those facts in the story actually be true. Either they remembered the wallpaper or they remembered going to his basement or something, and then you can be convinced of the rest of the facts that the other kids are feeding you, right? But like it's almost like you need one sliver of truth in there or something. This is totally speculation, of course, but I thought that was definitely a possibility.
Yeah. Major themes, just to sum it up: critique of mob behavior. We got that. I mentioned the hypocrisy of child abuse. What about the nature of friendships in this, right? Oh, I mentioned it where it's like where he's scanning his friend's table at the end. It's like he doesn't trust any of them to have his back anytime in the future.
Yeah, there's a contrast between what a close-knit community and the distance between people in such a close-knit community, right? As much as that seems like a desirable thing, that actually works against you. When one person suspects something about you, or one person dislikes you for some reason, everyone ends up kind of jumping on board. That's kind of what we see happen, right? So there's kind of a contrast there in terms of, I guess, the pros and cons, you could say, of such a small, isolated community.
Yeah, stubbornness of beliefs. Even after a year of Theo acknowledging Lucas's innocence, some guy out there, he still holds on to the belief that Lucas is a predator.
Yeah, and like you said, the whole open mind idea.
Yeah.
In terms of they couldn't come to a conversation with an open mind.
Yeah. All right. You guys, anything else?
I think that's all. I mean, I think we all liked the story. We all definitely liked the acting and the themes, right?
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So, guys, I think that wraps up this episode.
Okay. Hawaru.
I'm doing all right.
Okay. I guess that's not how you say goodbye in Danish, but,
How about German? Guten Tag. Close enough?
No, that's racist. Stop it.
Yeah, seriously.
I'm looking at that. I'm Googling it.
Right.
How do you say goodbye in Spanish?
In Spanish?
In Spanish. Oh, my God.
Okay. Yeah, I
That's the one
misspoke
you have
there.
to look up, huh?
Okay, so in Danish, it's Til Farvel.
Till farewell, everyone.
Til Farvel.
And adios, as they say in Denmark.
Til Farvel.
All right, I'm going to stop recording.
Thanks for listening to this production of The Twice Over. If you enjoyed this episode, consider subscribing and sharing it with a friend. Want to see what your tally is? Check out thetwiceover.com. All the movies we've done are listed there, as well as what we're watching for the current week. Follow us at The Twice Over on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, where you can leave us any suggestions, feedback, or comments. And if you're about it, you can also support us on Patreon. The music you hear on this podcast is from Amerigo Gazaway. You can find his work on Bandcamp and Spotify.